Imagine like mastering advanced calculus, complex legal frameworks, and these intricate macroeconomic models, only to realize that the single most important skill in your multi-million-dollar finance career is just basic human skepticism.
Yeah, it really is wild when you think about it.
Right. Because today we are diving into a 100-mark certification exam where the absolute foundation of the job, the ethics, the built-in BS detector, the psychological warfare is worth exactly one single point. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks. I mean, it is a fascinating paradox, really. We're looking at the official NISM Series XV Research Analyst Certification Workbook, specifically the February 2026 version, along with the official syllabus weightage document.
And we are zooming in exclusively on Chapter 1 today, right?
Exactly. Chapter 1 is basically the gateway to the entire profession. It sort of strips away the complex math for a minute to ask a much harder question, which is, how do you actually uncover the truth when millions of dollars are incentivizing people to hide it?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before you ever build a discounted cash flow model or, project a 5-year revenue runway, you have to actually gather the information.
You do. You need the raw materials.
And the text uses a really great, simple analogy of buying a smartphone. Like, you don't just point at a shiny box on a shelf.
Right. Nobody does that.
You compare battery specs, you look at the camera resolution, processor speeds, you gather the data, analyze it, and then make a decision based on your priorities.
Yeah, which is exactly what research analysts do for, massive institutional investments.
But I feel like while that analogy explains the basic mechanism, it radically underplays the scale of what these people are actually doing.
Oh, it absolutely underplays. The scale a research analyst operates on is just staggering. They aren't just comparing spec sheets.
Right.
They are, synthesizing global trade data. They're parsing through these incredibly layered industry trends and dissecting company-specific metrics. And a single misinterpretation there could literally cost a pension fund millions of dollars.
Wow.
Yeah, and before we even get into how they process all that data, we have to look at the structural environment they operate in.
The ecosystems.
Exactly. The text is very clear that you cannot separate the research itself from the entity that is paying for it.
Right, because the environment totally dictates who gets to see the final output. So, the workbook divides the research ecosystem into 3 distinct categories. Let's look at it like the culinary world.
I like this analogy.
So first, you have your sell-side analysts. They are basically the newspaper food critics. They work for investment banking or broking firms, and their entire job is to publish their research out in the public domain.
With specific buy, hold, or sell recommendations, yeah.
Exactly. So when you read a headline that, I don't know, a major bank just upgraded a tech stock to a buy with a target price of $150, that is sell-side research.
And because that research is totally public, it serves a dual purpose, right? I mean, it advises the firm's broad client base, but it also acts as this massive marketing tool for the investment bank's own trading desk, which, brings up an inherent structural tension.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if a sell-side analyst is publicly blasting a buy rating from the rooftops, how does the public know they aren't just pumping up a stock that their own investment bank is secretly trying to offload behind the scenes?
That right there is the exact friction the regulations are trying to manage. It's why investment banks are legally required to maintain what the industry calls Chinese walls.
Chinese walls, right.
Yeah, they are these strict, essentially unbreachable barriers of information between the research department and the investment banking or trading departments.
So they literally can't talk to each other about this stuff.
Exactly. An analyst cannot tailor their public recommendation just to help the bank's proprietary trading desk secure a better exit price. If those walls are breached, the regulatory fallout is catastrophic.
Because it's a massive conflict of interest otherwise. So, okay, the sell side is very public, very visible. But then you have the buy side analysts, and their world operates on completely inverted incentives.
Yeah, totally inverted.
Going back to the culinary thing, they are like the private food tasters working exclusively for the king.
That is a highly accurate contrast.
Mm.
Buy-side analysts work for asset managers, so mutual funds, hedge funds, pension funds. They aren't publishing anything for the public.
Zero public footprint.
None. They generate these highly secretive investment recommendations exclusively for their own internal fund managers who are trying to deploy massive pools of capital. For the buy side, their research is literally their proprietary edge.
Which makes sense, right? Because if a buy-side analyst discovers some massive inefficiency in the market or realizes a mid-cap pharmaceutical company is severely undervalued, the absolute last thing they want to do is write a public blog post about it.
Oh, absolutely not.
They want to quietly accumulate a massive position in that stock before the rest of the market even catches on. Their silence is their profit margin.
Precisely. Which leaves a very specific gap in the market for the third category, the text outlines, which is the independent research analysts.
Right, the independents.
These are boutique firms that have completely decoupled themselves from any brokerage or asset management arms.
So they don't have an agenda.
Exactly. They don't trade stocks, they don't manage funds, they just sell raw, customized research a la carte on a subscription basis to investors, institutions, or even regulators.
So if a massive institution needs a highly specialized report on, say, the competitive landscape of the semiconductor supply chain, and they don't want the bias of a sell-side bank, they just hire an independent firm.
You got it.
Okay, so we have the sell side shouting from the rooftops, the buy side whispering in closed boardrooms, and the independent selling bespoke intelligence. But honestly, regardless of who is signing their paycheck, where is the actual hard data coming from? Because you
Right.
can't just Google your way to a buy or sell recommendation, right? Where is the actual data?
The data diet is grueling. I mean, it is massive, and it starts from the top down. The workbook emphasizes that you cannot analyze a company in a vacuum. You have to understand the macroeconomic winds first.
Right.
So analysts pull foundational data from places like the Reserve Bank of India, the International Monetary Fund, the Asian Development Bank,
Yeah.
the World Bank.
All the heavy hitters.
Exactly. You have to know what interest rates, inflation, and global trade flows are doing.
Yeah.
Because, a great company in a collapsing macroeconomic environment is still a very dangerous investment.
It's the baseline. You can't predict how a shipping company will perform next quarter if you don't know if global trade routes are physically moving.
Right, exactly. And once they have that macro baseline, they drill down into the company-specific data, mostly from regulatory filings and annual reports.
And the text breaks this down into two dimensions, right? The
Yeah.
quantitative and the qualitative.
I mean, anyone who follows finance knows the basics here. The quantitative is the hard numbers, the revenues, costs, profitability, balance sheets, the math, exactly. And the qualitative is the intangible stuff, the management's work ethic, the efficiency of operations, brand power, business plans.
But what's fascinating here is the friction between the two. You can have all the quantitative data in the world, but if the qualitative side is flawed, the numbers won't save you.
Oh, that is where the actual analysis happens. I mean, you can have a discounted cash flow model that is just a work of art. The revenues are compounding, margins are expanding, the debt-to-equity ratio is flawless.
So it's perfect on paper.
Perfect on paper.
Right.
But if the CEO has a history of playing fast and loose with regulatory filings, or if, the board of directors is just filled with the founder's college roommates, your beautiful math is basically standing on quicksand.
Right. Because the numbers only tell you where the company has been. The qualitative factors dictate where the people driving the company are going to take it in the future. And you can't measure a CEO's actual integrity on a spreadsheet.
You really can't.
Yeah.
And that is exactly why the text stresses that analysts cannot just sit behind a multi-monitor desk parsing through PDFs all day. To evaluate that qualitative side, they have to physically step into the arena.
They have to interact with the C-suite.
They do. They have to play the financial detective. Personal communication with management provides all the nuance and context that just simply does not exist in a sterilized, legally scrubbed annual report.
But stepping into a room with a CEO presents its own unique dangers, doesn't it? It's not just a casual chat. It's like going on a first date. The management is always going to put their best foot forward.
That is a great way to put it. The text actually uses a very specific phrase for this. It says, management will always try to paint a rosy picture.
It's a rosy picture, right?
Yeah, to deliberately exaggerate the positives and influence market prices. And they don't usually do this by outright lying because that's fraud.
Right, they'd go to jail.
Exactly. They do it through selective omission and aggressive optimism. They might highlight a massive spike in top-line revenue, but casually gloss over the fact that their customer acquisition costs had to double to achieve it.
Because they have a vested interest in influencing the analyst to write a favorable report.
Which moves their stock price, which often directly impacts the CEO's own compensation package.
Oh, okay. So how does the analyst survive that? How do they walk into a boardroom, face a charismatic CEO who has spent decades learning how to control a narrative, and actually extract the truth without falling for the rosy picture?
Well, they have to rely on very strict rules of engagement. And it starts long before they ever enter the room, with intense pre-meeting research.
Because FaceTime with top management is pretty rare.
Incredibly rare. An analyst cannot waste a 30-minute meeting asking his CFO to explain their basic revenue model. So the analyst goes back 3 or 4 years into previous annual reports. They look at what management promised the market back then and compare it to what they actually delivered today.
So they're actively hunting for discrepancies.
Exactly.
If the CEO claimed 3 years ago that a new manufacturing plant would reduce operational costs by 15%, the analyst is looking at today's margins to see if that ever actually happened.
And if it didn't, that becomes the foundation of the second rule, which is clarity of questions.
Yeah.
The analyst doesn't just walk in and ask, "So how are operations?"
Right. That's way too broad.
Way too broad. They walk in with a highly specific questionnaire and ask, "In Q3 of 2023, you projected a 15% cost reduction from the new plant, but current gross margins have compressed by 2%. Walk me through exactly where the operational leakage is occurring."
Oh, wow. That is surgical. It completely forces management off their prepared script. But wait, there is a massive legal trap here, right?
Yeah.
Because if you push a CEO hard enough, or if they just get careless, they might accidentally reveal non-public insider information.
Which brings us to the rule of independence and neutrality. It is highly illegal to trade on insider information. The analyst has to actively protect themselves and their firm,
So they have to remain unbiased.
unbiased, and they must expressly ask management not to reveal any non-public material information during the meeting. They have to maintain an emotional and professional distance.
But even with all that, the pre-research, the surgical questions, the legal boundaries, you are still ultimately relying on the word of someone whose literal job is to sell you the company.
Which is why we have the final and, frankly, most grueling step of the detective work, network cross-verification.
Okay, what does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, you cannot just take the CEO's word for it. Let's look at a hypothetical scenario. Say an analyst is covering an agricultural machinery company. The CEO sits in a nice glass boardroom and confidently claims their new line of tractors is dominating the market, just flying out of dealerships.
Okay.
The analyst notes the claim, smiles, leaves the building, and then starts making phone calls.
They don't look at the internal sales projections?
Nope. They call the regional dealership owner in Punjab to ask if the tractors are actually moving off the lot or if they are just gathering dust in the back.
Oh, wow.
They talk to the suppliers. They check with the logistics company shipping the parts. They even analyze the competitors to bypass that rosy picture. If every competitor in this sector is reporting a massive slowdown in rural demand, but this one CEO claims they are having record sales.
That discrepancy is a huge red flag.
Exactly. The analyst cross-verifies the boardroom narrative with the messy reality of the supply chain.
It's pure shoe leather detective work. I love that. So after gathering global macroeconomic data, interrogating management, and cross-verifying with suppliers and truck drivers, the analyst finally has a conclusion.
They have a thesis.
But having the right answer in your head is pretty useless if it isn't communicated effectively to the client. So what does this all mean for the listener at home who's actually reading these reports? What are the rules for how this information is delivered?
The communication phase is incredibly strict. The text mandates that reports must be simple, clear, and concise. Analysts must avoid all jargon, or at least clearly explain it if they have to use it. But more than that, they must state their assumptions explicitly.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
Sure. Let's say you are recommending a strong buy on an airline stock because your model shows massive future cash flows. But your model only works if aviation turbine fuel stays below a specific price point.
Okay.
You cannot bury that detail in a footnote. That assumption must be clearly and boldly stated so the client understands the specific risks they are taking on.
That makes total sense. It's about intellectual honesty. And there's an even bigger emphasis on transparency regarding conflicts of interest, right?
Disclosing conflicts of interest up front is absolutely paramount. It is the bedrock of trust. If an analyst or their CERM or even their immediate relatives hold shares in the company they are recommending, that must be disclosed.
The reader has a fundamental right to know.
Exactly. You need to know if the person telling you to buy a stock stands to personally profit from that transaction.
And I noticed a really interesting detail in the text regarding how they protect this transparency. It specifically recommends the use of recording devices during interviews and client communications.
Yes, with due consent, of course.
With due consent, obviously. But it isn't just for note-taking. It's to ensure absolute sincerity and strict adherence to SEBI regulations. So there are no he said, she said disputes later on.
It is a legal armor. It really highlights how high stakes this environment is.
Which brings us all the way back to the ultimate paradox we started with, the one-mark paradox. Here's where it gets really interesting. We have just established that the job requires a blend of hardcore math, aggressive detective-level skepticism, and flawless communication.
Yeah.
But if you look directly at the syllabus weightage image provided in the sources, Chapter 1 covers everything we just talked about. The ecosystems, the qualitative friction, the management interrogations, the ethics. And on a 100-mark final NISM certification exam, this entire foundational chapter is worth exactly one single mark.
1 mark out of 100. It
Mm.
seems almost absurd when you look at it purely numerically, doesn't it?
It's crazy. You can master every single element of the psychological warfare and the ethical disclosures, and you walk away with a 1% score. How does the financial industry actually justify valuing these foundational skills so low on paper?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the paradox totally makes sense. The traits listed in Chapter 1 being good with numbers, mastering Excel, having an inquiring mind, paying attention to detail, they are merely the basic entry fee to the profession.
They're just the prerequisites.
Exactly. They only get you 1 mark, because if you don't already have these baseline human qualities, you literally won't survive the complex valuation and financial analysis that makes up the other 99% of the job.
That is such a good point. The other 99 marks are dedicated to the grueling mechanics of corporate valuation and macroeconomic modeling. Those are the technical skills that can be taught and heavily tested.
Right. You cannot teach a 25-year-old analyst how to have a moral compass in a textbook.
You can't.
You cannot teach them the innate curiosity required to track down a regional distributor in Punjab just because a single number in a spreadsheet felt slightly off. If you don't have those qualities naturally, the rest of the job will crush you.
So to tie this all together for you, the listener, the next time you are reading a financial article or prepping for a meeting or looking at a hot stock tip online, take a moment to be your own research analyst.
Ask the hard questions.
Ask yourself, who actually paid the analyst who wrote this piece? Are they sell-side trying to generate trading volume? Did they actually cross-verify the CEO's claims, or did they just fall for a rosy picture?
Yeah.
And most importantly, did they disclose their own conflicts of interest?
It fundamentally changes how you consume financial media. And, it leaves us with a really provocative final question to ponder.
What's that?
Well, the source material heavily emphasizes the analyst's need to manually cross-verify corporate claims by networking with human beings, right? The human suppliers, the distributors.
The people who actually know if the tractors are moving.
Exactly. But in a future where supply chains become fully automated and operational data is increasingly locked away in these AI-driven, highly guarded corporate silos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, how will the financial detective of tomorrow uncover the truth when there are literally no human suppliers left to talk to?
That is a chilling thought. When the whole world runs on automated logistics, finding the reality hidden beneath the corporate spin is going to require an entirely new kind of detective work. But the core principle remains exactly the same. The data only ever tells you what a company wants you to see. The real analysis is finding out what they're trying to hide. Keep digging.